At 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, Vance Sterling stood in a Tribeca service alley, staring at a woman he'd seen every single day for 6 years. She was sitting on flattened cardboard, leaning against a dumpster that reeked of rotting shrimp and diesel fuel. Her uniform, the same crisp white blouse and black skirt she'd worn in his penthouse, was now stained with something dark and unidentifiable. When her hollow eyes met his, she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just whispered 7 words that would unravel his entire life. "Mr. Sterling, I waited for you. I knew you'd come. Before we tell you how a billionaire's maid ended up living behind a dumpster while he paid her salary every single month, we need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell us what city you're watching from, because this story could happen in any city. It could happen to you. Welcome to my channel. Please do well to support by liking and subscribe and comment where you are watching from. See you at the end of the Mullah video. God bless you." Vance's driver had taken a shortcut through the alley after a board meeting that ran until 2 in the morning. The Mercedes hit a pothole deep enough to blow the front tire, and when Vance stepped out into the freezing drizzle, he was wearing an $8,000 Tom Ford suit and Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Steam rose from the grates. Distant sirens echoed off the brick walls. The smell hit him first, that mix of garbage and rain and something else he couldn't place, something human and desperate. He almost didn't recognize her. Zola had always been invisible to him in the way that people who serve you become invisible. She knew how he liked his coffee. She handled his private documents. She'd been in his home for 6 years, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at her face long enough to notice if she was tired or sick or even happy. Now she was 3 feet away, sitting on cardboard, and her face was all he could see. Hollow cheeks, eyes that had seen too much, hands shaking even though they were tucked inside her coat. His driver tried to pull him back toward the car. "Sir, the tow truck is 10 minutes out. We should wait inside." Vance didn't move. He kept staring at Zola and she kept staring back, and between them hung a question neither of them had asked yet. How did this happen? She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, but no sound came out. Her lips were cracked. Her hair, which had always been pulled back in a neat bun, hung loose and tangled around her shoulders. She looked like she'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. What would you do in this moment? Walk away? Or break every rule you've ever lived by? Vance took a step forward. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through his suit jacket, but he didn't care. "Zola, what happened to you?" She flinched when he said her name, like she'd forgotten he even knew it. Her voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper. "I waited for you, Mr. Sterling. Every night I came back to this alley because I knew eventually you'd work late. I knew you'd come this way. I just had to wait." The tow truck's headlights swept across the alley entrance, and Vance made a decision that would change everything. He turned to his driver. "Call the tow truck. Tell them to meet us at the office." Then he looked down at Zola. "You're coming with me." She didn't argue. She just stood up, slow and careful like her body hurt, and followed him to the car. When she climbed into the back seat, the smell of garbage and unwashed clothes filled the space, and Vance saw his driver's face in the rearview mirror, disgust barely hidden. He didn't care. He had 6 years of not caring to make up for. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a 24-hour diner on Canal Street. Zola sat across from him in a booth, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched yet. She was shaking so hard the cup rattled against the saucer. Vance ordered her food, scrambled eggs and toast and bacon, enough for 2 people. When it arrived, she ate like someone who hadn't seen a real meal in weeks, which turned out to be exactly true. Between bites, the story came out. 14 months. That's how long it had been since Zola had been paid. 14 months of showing up to work in Vance's penthouse, cleaning his floors, pressing his shirts, handling documents that could move markets, all while Garrison Thorne, Vance's brother-in-law and chief operating officer, told her the same lie every week. "Vance is bankrupt. The company's in trouble. You're lucky you still have a roof over your head." Vance felt something cold settle in his chest. "That's impossible. I transfer $25,000 every month to domestic payroll." Zola looked up from her plate, and for the first time since he'd found her, something other than fear crossed her face. Confusion. Mr. Sterling, I never saw a dollar of that. None of us did. Mr. Thorne told us you paid us directly, in cash. He said the transfers were just for taxes. The coffee in Vance's cup had gone cold. He pulled out his phone with hands that weren't quite steady and opened his banking app. Right there, in black and white, the evidence of his ignorance. $25,000 transferred to Domestic Payroll LLC every single month for 6 years. Over $1.8 million. He turned the screen toward Zola. Look, the money left my account. Where did it go? Her face went pale. She reached across the table and grabbed his wrist, the first time in 6 years she'd ever touched him without permission. Mr. Sterling? That company? I've never heard of it. None of us have. Your brother-in-law told us you paid us directly, in cash. The pieces started falling into place, ugly and sharp. If Garrison had been lying to Zola about where the money came from, what else had he been lying about? Vance opened his email on his phone, fingers moving faster now. He searched for Domestic Payroll LLC. 0 results. He searched for Garrison's name plus offshore, and there it was, buried in a thread from 18 months ago. Subject line, Re. Aris Vancorp Competitor Analysis. Confidential. The first line made his blood run cold. Garrison, the Maid confirmed. Vance is moving forward with the Singapore acquisition. Recording attached. Vance looked up at Zola, and she must have seen something in his face because she put down her fork. What is it? He couldn't answer. He was too busy opening the attachment, a 3-minute audio file recorded in his own home office. His own voice, talking on the phone about merger terms and client lists and acquisition targets. And underneath it, the sound of someone moving around the room, cleaning, dusting, close enough to hear every word. When did Garrison ask you to clean my office during my morning calls? Zola's hands started shaking again. About a year ago, he said it was important you had privacy, that I should clean quietly while you worked. I thought I was being helpful. The diner felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. Vance stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. We need to go. Now. But Zola wasn't moving. She was staring at him with something that looked like hope, and it broke something in his chest. Mr. Sterling, when I asked Mr. Thorne for money to send home, when I told him my daughter needed surgery in Ghana, he threw me out. He called building security and told them I was trespassing. He said if I ever came back, he'd call ICE and have me deported. She pulled a worn green card from her coat pocket. I'm legal. I've always been legal. But he said you'd believe him over me. Vance sat back down. Zola's daughter. He'd never asked her name, never asked to see a picture, never asked anything that would have made her human instead of just a fixture in his home. How old is your daughter? 12. Her name is Amma. The surgery, it was for her heart. I sent everything I had before Mr. Thorne cut me off. I don't know if it was enough. The guilt was a physical weight now, pressing down on his shoulders. How long have you been living in that alley? 3 weeks, ever since he threw me out. Zola's voice was barely audible. I couldn't go to a shelter. I was afraid he'd find me. I was afraid you'd believe his lies. So I waited. I waited for you to work late. I waited for you to come. Have you ever taken someone for granted? Someone who showed up for you every single day and you never really saw them until they were gone. Drop a comment below. Tell us what happened, because Vance is about to learn that the cost of not paying attention isn't just money. It's everything. Vance paid the check and took Zola back to his penthouse. At 4:30 in the morning, while she slept in the guest suite for the first time in weeks, he sat in his home office pulling up 6 years of financial records. The pattern emerged like a bruise spreading across skin. $25,000 leaving his account every month. But when he cross-referenced the domestic staff accounts, only $3,000 was arriving. $22,000 vanishing every single month, over $1.5 million in total. He called his forensic accountant at 6 a.m., didn't care that it was Sunday morning. Within 2 hours, they'd found it. Garrison had created fake vendor accounts, routing the stolen money to offshore LLCs with names like Harbor Holdings and Meridian Management. The LLCs had been funding something else, and when Vance saw what it was, his hands started shaking. A rival firm. Garrison had been using stolen Maid money to build a competitor. Sterling Equity Partners, set to launch the following Monday with 3 of Vance's top clients already signed. The website was live. The contracts were drawn. The only thing missing was the hostile takeover vote scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday morning, where Garrison planned to remove Vance as CEO and gut the company from the inside. Vance's phone rang. It was Garrison. "Morning, Vance. We need to talk about Monday's board meeting. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence." Vance didn't answer the call. He let it go to voicemail and walked down the hall to the guest suite where Zola was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed like she didn't quite believe she was allowed to be there. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. She looked at him and waited, the way she'd always waited for him to speak first. "I need to hear the recording, the one Garrison had you make." She pulled an old phone from her coat pocket, the screen cracked but still working. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the files. There were dozens of them, months of conversations recorded while she cleaned, while Vance talked about mergers and acquisitions and client lists, completely unaware that every word was being captured. She pressed play on the most recent one. Garrison's voice filled the room, smooth and confident. "The maid is perfect. She cleans while he takes calls. Vance doesn't even notice she's there. We've got 6 months of client data, merger plans, everything." Another voice in the background, a woman Vance didn't recognize at first. "And she has no idea what she's recording?" Garrison laughed. "She thinks she's doing her job. When we launch the takeover Monday, he won't know what hit him. And that stupid maid thinks she's getting paid." The woman's voice came again, clearer this time. "What about after? When it's done?" Garrison's response was cold. "She's a liability. I already threw her out, told building security she was stealing. If she tries to come back or contact Vance, they'll call the cops. Problem solved." Vance stopped the recording. That voice. The woman in the background. He knew it now, and the recognition hit like a punch to the gut. "That's Simone, my ex-wife." Zola nodded slowly. "I saw her twice. She came to the penthouse when you were traveling. She and Mr. Thorne would go into your office and close the door." The betrayal kept getting deeper, layers upon layers. Simone had walked away from their marriage with $40 million 2 years ago, and apparently that wasn't enough. She'd partnered with Garrison to take the rest. They'd been planning this for years, maybe since before the divorce. Using Zola as an unwitting spy, stealing from the domestic staff, building a rival firm with Vance's own money and information. Zola's voice was quiet. "I didn't know what I was recording, Mr. Sterling. He told me to clean your office during your morning calls, said it was important you had privacy. I thought I was helping. You were protecting my secrets even while they used you to steal them." Vance sat down on the chair near the window. "Monday morning, that board meeting where Garrison wants me out? You're coming with me, and we're going to burn his empire to the ground." But first, they had 72 hours to build a case that would stand up in court and in the boardroom. By Saturday afternoon, Vance's penthouse had transformed into a war room. His lawyer arrived with boxes of files. A forensic accountant set up 3 laptops on the dining table. A private investigator Vance had used for due diligence on acquisitions started making calls. And Zola sat in the middle of it all, giving testimony, providing dates, pointing out inconsistencies in the records. The forensic accountant found the smoking gun by Sunday morning. Garrison hadn't just been stealing domestic payroll. He'd been skimming from operational budgets across the company, small amounts that wouldn't trigger automatic audits. 200 here, 500 there, always under the threshold. Over 4 years, he'd diverted nearly $3 million into the offshore accounts funding Sterling Equity Partners. But it got worse. The private investigator came back with something that made Vance's stomach drop. Garrison's rival firm had already poached 3 of Vance's top clients. The contracts were signed, dated for the day after the board meeting. Garrison had promised them better terms, lower fees, access to deals that Vance was supposedly holding back. All lies, but the clients had believed them because Garrison had insider information. He knew exactly what to say, exactly what buttons to push. The hostile takeover was real. Garrison had lined up votes from 4 board members, enough to remove Vance as CEO if they voted Monday morning. Once Vance was out, Garrison would install himself as interim CEO, gut the company's assets, and move everything valuable to Sterling Equity Partners. Eris Van Corp would be a shell within 6 months. Vance's lawyer looked up from her notes. We have evidence of embezzlement, corporate espionage, and breach of fiduciary duty. But Garrison's smart. He'll claim the recordings were made without his knowledge. He'll say Zola was acting alone, that she was the one stealing, and you're covering for her because you feel guilty. Then we need something he can't explain away. The private investigator leaned forward. There's one more thing. Garrison filed an emergency injunction yesterday. He's claiming you're mentally unfit to serve as CEO, citing erratic behavior, paranoia, and he's got an affidavit from your building's head of security saying you brought a disoriented vagrant into the building at 3 a.m. and have been seen talking to yourself in your office. The room went silent. Vance felt the floor tilt under him. If the judge granted that injunction Monday morning, he wouldn't be allowed in the boardroom. The vote would happen without him. Garrison would win by default. How long do we have? The hearing is at 8 a.m. Monday, 1 hour before the board meeting. Vance looked at his lawyer. Can we stop it? She was already pulling up files on her laptop. We can try, but we need to prove you're not only sane, but that Garrison has motive to lie. The recording helps. Zola's testimony helps. But judges are cautious with these things. If there's any doubt, then we don't give them doubt. Vance turned to Zola. I need you to tell the judge exactly what happened. Everything. From the first day Garrison stopped paying you to the night he threw you out. Can you do that? She met his eyes and nodded. For 14 months, I stayed silent because I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. Sunday night, Vance's lawyer filed an emergency response to the injunction, attaching Zola's written testimony, the audio recordings, and the forensic analysis of the embezzlement. At 11:47 p.m., Vance's phone buzzed with a text from Garrison. See you at 9 a.m., brother. Hope you're ready to step down with dignity. Vance didn't respond. He sat in his office, staring at the spreadsheet of stolen money, and realized something that had been obvious all along. He'd built a $14 billion empire by paying attention to details, by seeing patterns others missed, by never trusting anything at face value. But in his own home, with his own family, he'd been blind. He'd outsourced his integrity to Garrison and assumed good intentions. He'd walked past Zola every single day for 6 years and never once asked if she was okay. At 6:30 Monday morning, the judge denied Garrison's injunction. The ruling was brief and brutal. The court finds insufficient evidence of mental incapacity and notes with concern that petitioner stands to benefit materially from respondent's removal. Motion denied. Vance's lawyer called with the news, and for the first time in 72 hours, he felt like he could breathe. We're clear for the board meeting. But Vance, you need to understand what's about to happen. When you walk into that room and present this evidence, you're not just exposing Garrison, you're blowing up your family. Your sister will never forgive you. Half your social circle will take his side. Are you ready for that? He thought about Zola sitting on cardboard in an alley waiting for him. He thought about 14 months of stolen wages and a 12-year-old girl in Ghana who needed heart surgery. He thought about the lie he'd been living, the comfortable fiction that he was a good man just because money left his account every month. I'm ready. At 8:55 Monday morning, Vance walked into the Eris Van Corp boardroom on the 14th floor. Garrison was already there, sitting at the head of the table like he owned it. Next to him was Simone, listed on the meeting agenda as external consultant. When Garrison saw Vance, his smile was pure confidence. Morning, Vance. Glad you could make it. I was worried you might not show. Vance didn't respond. He took his seat at the opposite end of the table. The board members filed in, 14 people who controlled billions in assets. They looked uncomfortable, caught between two powerful men, unsure which way to lean. That was about to change. At exactly 9 a.m., Garrison stood up. Before we begin, I'd like to call for a vote of no confidence in our current CEO. Recent events have made it clear that Vance Sterling is no longer capable of leading this company with the judgment and stability our clients deserve. That's when the door opened. Zola walked in, flanked by Vance's lawyer and a federal agent from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Garrison's face went white. Behind them came Vance's forensic accountant, carrying 3 banker's boxes full of evidence. Vance stood up. Before we vote, I'd like to present evidence of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He nodded to his lawyer, who connected a laptop to the boardroom's display screen. The first thing that appeared was the audio recording. Garrison's voice filled the room, bragging about using the Maid to spy, about stealing money, about the takeover plan. The board members leaned forward, faces hardening. Next came the forensic analysis. Every stolen dollar tracked and documented. The offshore LLCs, the fake vendor accounts, the rival firm funded with embezzled money. Then Zola's testimony, calm and clear, describing 14 months without pay, the threats, the lies, being thrown out into the street with nothing. Garrison tried to interrupt. This is a setup. That woman is an illegal immigrant with an agenda. She's been stealing from Vance for years, and now he's covering for her out of guilt. Vance dropped Zola's green card on the table. She's legal, has been for 8 years. He turned to the board. You've all met Garrison's accusations with patience. Now let me show you something else. He pulled up the final document, the one his private investigator had found Sunday afternoon. It was Vance's daughter's trust fund statement. 2 years of unexplained withdrawals, $80,000 missing. Garrison, did you think I wouldn't notice you were stealing from my daughter? The room erupted. Board members started talking over each other, voices rising. Garrison stood frozen, his confident smile finally cracking. Simone tried to stand up, but Vance's lawyer was already moving toward her with a folder of civil suit papers. The federal agent stepped forward, badge visible. Garrison Thorne, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. He pulled out handcuffs, and Garrison's face went from white to red. This is insane. Vance, tell them this is a misunderstanding. We're family. Vance didn't move. You stopped being family the day you decided my daughter's future was worth less than your ambition. The agent cuffed Garrison's wrists behind his back and started reading him his rights. Simone was served with papers for a civil suit, her hands shaking as she tried to read through them. The board members sat in stunned silence, watching everything they thought they knew about their COO disintegrate in real time. As Garrison was led toward the door, he stopped and turned back to Vance. His voice was low, venomous. You think this is over? You have no idea how deep this goes. Check your daughter's trust fund again. Really look at it. Because I'm not the only one who's been taking from you. The door closed behind him. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the board chairman cleared his throat. I think we can table the vote of no confidence. All in favor of terminating Garrison Thorne's employment and freezing his equity? 14 hands went up. The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, Vance sat alone in his office and pulled up his daughter Mira's trust fund on his computer. Garrison's parting words echoed in his head. Really look at it. He went back further than the 2 years of withdrawals he'd already found. 3 years. 4 years. And there it was, hidden in transaction codes and fake investment fees. Garrison had been siphoning money from Mira's trust fund for 4 years. Not just $80,000, $240,000 stolen from a child's future. But that wasn't what made Vance's blood run cold. The withdrawals had started 6 months before his divorce from Simone, which meant this wasn't opportunistic theft. It was planned. Garrison and Simone had been coordinating this for years, bleeding him dry from multiple angles, waiting for the right moment to take everything. His lawyer walked in without knocking. The FBI wants to talk to you about Simone. Apparently, she's been moving money to the Cayman Islands for the past 18 months. They think she was planning to disappear once Garrison took over the company. How much did they move? $12 million. All of it from your accounts. structured to look like legitimate business expenses and consulting fees. Vance closed his eyes. The number was almost meaningless at this point. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was about the years of lies, the betrayal by people he'd trusted most, the realization that while he'd been building an empire, the people closest to him had been plotting to tear it down. What happens now? Federal charges for both of them. Simone's looking at wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Garrison's looking at 15 to 20 years if they can prove even half of what we've documented. His lawyer sat down across from him. Vance, we're going to recover most of the money. The offshore accounts can be frozen and seized. Mira's trust fund can be made whole. But the damage to your reputation, to the company, that's going to take time. What about Zola? We can pay her back wages, damages, emotional distress. I'm thinking $680,000 plus legal fees. It won't undo what happened, but it's a start. Vance nodded. Set it up. And I want something else. I want to create a foundation. Independent oversight, legal resources for domestic workers, protection against wage theft. I want Zola to run it. His lawyer raised an eyebrow. You want your former maid to run a foundation? I want the woman who saved my company to have the resources to save others. Can you make it happen? I can make it happen. 3 weeks later, Vance stood in the break room of Aris Van Corp's 14th floor, a room he'd never entered in 12 years as CEO. It was 7:15 in the morning before the executives arrived. Sitting at the small round table were 4 people. Marisol, the night janitor who'd cleaned his office for 9 years. James, the security guard who worked the lobby. Lynn, the coordinator who managed the executive assistant pool. And Zola, wearing a tailored suit instead of a maid's uniform. Vance placed a stack of envelopes on the table. These are your equity grants. As of today, you're not just employees. You're shareholders. You own a piece of this company. If we win, you win. If we fail, you have a vote in how we fix it. Marisol stared at the envelope with shaking hands. Mr. Sterling, this says 50,000 shares. That's right. But I clean toilets. Vance sat down across from her, at their table for the first time in his life. Marisol, you've cleaned my office for 9 years. You've seen every document, every whiteboard, every late-night crisis. You know more about how this company runs than half my board does. If I'd been paying attention, if I'd asked your opinion even once, Garrison never would have gotten away with what he did. He looked at each of them. I'm not giving you equity because I'm generous. I'm doing it because I was blind. And I can't afford to be blind anymore. James, the security guard, cleared his throat. Sir, does this mean we can fire Garrison's nephew? The one who parks in the loading zone every morning and yells at us? Vance smiled for the first time in weeks. James, you're a shareholder now. You tell me. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Lynn spoke up, her voice steady. We keep him on, but he gets one warning. He treats people with respect, or he's gone. That's how we're running things now. Vance nodded. That's exactly how we're running things now. 6 months later, Zola stood at a podium in Geneva, presenting to the United Nations International Labor Organization. Her daughter Amma sat in the front row, fully recovered from her surgery, watching her mother speak about invisible labor and systemic wage theft. The Invisible Labor Advocacy Initiative had helped recover over $8 million in stolen wages for domestic workers across 6 states. They'd provided legal representation for 42 cases. They'd changed 3 state laws. Vance watched from the back of the room. He'd flown in for this, even though he wasn't on the schedule to speak. Zola had insisted she didn't need him there, that this was her moment, but he'd come anyway. Not as her former employer, as someone who'd learned that the people you don't see are often the ones holding your world together. After her presentation, they had coffee in a small cafe near the UN building. Amma had gone off with Zola's sister to see the lake, leaving them alone for the first time since the trial ended. Garrison had been sentenced to 18 years. Simone was still fighting extradition from the Cayman Islands, but the FBI had frozen her accounts and seized her assets. The money was coming back, slowly, through legal channels that would take years to fully resolve. You didn't have to come, Zola said, stirring sugar into her coffee. I know you're busy. I wanted to see this. What you've built. It's more important than anything I've ever done." She looked at him with those same calm eyes that had stared at him from a pile of cardboard in an alley. "You gave me the resources, Mr. Sterling. But this work, it's not about you. It's about the thousands of people who are invisible right now, who are waiting for someone to see them." "I know. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see you." They sat in silence for a moment, watching people walk past the cafe window. Then Zola spoke again. "My daughter asked me something last night. She asked if I was angry at you. For not knowing, for not seeing what was happening." "What did you tell her?" "That anger is easy. It's seeing past the anger that's hard. You could have walked past me in that alley. You could have let Garrison's lies stand, but you didn't. And now 1,200 people have their wages back. That matters more than anger." Vance thought about that as he flew back to New York, about anger and blindness and the choice to see. When he got home, his daughter Mira was waiting for him. She was 15 now, old enough to understand what had happened, old enough to ask hard questions. They had had a lot of conversations over the past 6 months about trust and family and what it means when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones hurting you instead. "Dad," she said, sitting on the kitchen counter while he made coffee. His own coffee, the way he'd been doing every morning since Zola left. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you going to trust people again? Or is this going to make you suspicious forever?" He measured out the grounds, thinking about how to answer. "I'm going to trust differently. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to ask questions. I'm not going to assume that just because money leaves my account, it's reaching the people it's supposed to reach." That sounds exhausting. It is. But you know what's more exhausting? Living in a world you think you understand when you're actually blind to half of what's happening around you. He poured water into the machine. "Your uncle stole from you, Mira. From your future. And I didn't see it because I wasn't looking. I'm never going to stop looking again." She jumped down from the counter and hugged him. "Good. Because I need you to see me too. Not just the bad stuff, the good stuff, the boring stuff, all of it." He held her tight. "I see you, I promise." Rate this story 0 to 10. And remember, the people you don't see are often the ones holding your world together. The janitor who cleans your office, the security guard who checks your ID, the assistant who schedules your meetings. They know more about your life than you think. And if you're not paying attention, if you're outsourcing your integrity to someone else, you're one betrayal away from losing everything. Vance Sterling learned that lesson the hard way. He found his maid living behind a dumpster and discovered that his family had been stealing her salary for over a year. But that wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning. The beginning of actually seeing the people around him. The beginning of understanding that success without awareness is just expensive blindness. Never outsource your integrity. Never assume someone else is handling the details of human decency on your behalf. And never, ever walk past someone in need without stopping to ask if they're okay. Because the cost of not paying attention isn't just money. It's everything. Thank you for watching. God bless you.